have a swamp cooler. 86 degrees in the house, and the kids have been so grouchy. It's beyond belief.
Test. Okay.
Maybe we should shift her to the other side and, well, no, then we don't want, we could all slide down.
All right, the recording's on. Let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
The Centerville City Council is now in session. Thank you for joining us this evening. We appreciate coming, and especially friends and family of Officer Scott, who's joined us tonight. We'll note for the record that we have 4 members of the City Council in attendance. Councilman McEwen is traveling. He may call in later in the meeting if he gets to a point where he is able to do so. We've got all these handsome men in uniform here. Maybe we should ask one of them to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance before we to start this meeting. Chief, will you or Vaughn, will you lead us in that in the pledge, and then we'll have a prayer or thought before we turn some more time over to you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I always like to share a thought as well as give a prayer. And tonight, the thought I'd like to share is a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men and women willing to be co-workers with God." Our most gracious Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity that we have to be here together tonight in this hallowed hall to do the work of Centerville City and to represent its citizens to the best of our ability. We're thankful to live in this beautiful, blessed land and to be neighbors with all of the good people here. We're thankful for all those who are willing to volunteer their hours to give us wonderful celebrations such as we experienced this last week. We're thankful for our men and women in uniform, for those who respond to our crises and put their lives in danger. We celebrate them, and we ask thee to have a special blessing to be over them, a blessing of protection and a blessing of strength and a blessing of bravery. We ask that as we do the work of the city tonight, that thy spirit of wisdom and peace and compromise might be with us. We say these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tammy. All right, we're very pleased tonight to have our newest police officer, Officer Casey Scott, with us, and we'll turn the podium over to Lieutenant Steinblick to guide us through the swearing in.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Fillmore, thank you for your prayer. This is our newest officer, Officer Casey Scott. Have you stand up? Thank you. He is here to be sworn in tonight and have his badge pinned on him. It will be badge number 18 of 18 officers. And his family is here with him, his wife, Randy, and I don't know the rest of your family. So if you would introduce them.
My little boy Parker, Phoenix, my mom Susan, my dad Kevin, and Randy's parents, Susan and Toy.
All right. Thank you for being here to support Casey. So Randy's going to pin the badge on him. Parker's going to. Okay. Okay, great. You know what to do, Parker? Hey, come on up here. wearing his vest, so it won't go through his chest.
Hey, Parker, look at me. Parker, look at me.
Good job.
Okay. All right, Officer Scott, will you please raise your right hand to the square and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with
and I will
fidelity.
discharge the duties of my office
With fidelity.
with fidelity.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks.
Been to a few of these badge meetings, but never one with the like that with Parker. That was great. Before we excuse our police officers, I asked Lieutenant Steinblick if there was anything else he wanted to share on a quick report, the significant incident that we had yesterday.
So I'm sure you're all aware, saw the emails or the news media, the incident that occurred on July 4th, something that we didn't want to happen on the 4th of July, and we had several other duties that we wanted to take care of and celebrate the 4th of July, and we're very busy on the parade route, but we were made aware of this situation when we first came on at 5:30 in the morning, and there was the pursuit then that was coming north on Legacy Highway, and we had officers respond down to make sure that the vehicle couldn't get off of Legacy, or to keep them on Legacy or spike them and not let them come up into the city. That vehicle continued throughout the morning to come back into the area of West Bountiful, and Centerville. They attempted many times to stop him, and every time he would flee, and the pursuits were terminated for safety reasons. The information was that he was suicidal, and he may do suicide by cop. And we were trying not to force the issue, but still balance protecting the public, especially on the parade route. So we kept close tabs on the radio. Another officer spotted him, and he was coming east on Pages Lane and went south on Main Street as the parade was just finishing in the north part of the city, north part of Main Street. And then he doubled back and came back on 200 West onto R400 West. Another pursuit briefly with Bountiful started. He took off again, so they stopped. I spotted him on 400 West and watched him go into Walmart parking lot. The hope was that he would park or stop. We had unmarked vehicles trying to keep track of him. Chief Child said, do not let him get to the parade route. And at that point, everybody was leaving the area from the south end of the city, from Parish South. And the parade continued north. He went through Walmart's parking lot, did not stop, and came east on Parish Lane, at which time many of the officers were set up and prepared for him, and were able to block that area, and he began very recklessly again driving, and we forced him back westbound. He went west on Parish, blowing through red lights. Utah Highway Patrol was set up on Parish Lane overpass, and were able to spike the vehicle. A very good spike. You're really lucky to get one tire, and they got all four. So we knew he wasn't going real far, but he continued driving very recklessly, continued west and got onto Legacy Highway northbound. Our thought was to stay with him until Highway Patrol could catch up and take over the pursuit. Unfortunately, that didn't happen until a UHP trooper got there and did a pit maneuver. spinning him around, but not disabling him. We tried to pin him in, and he was able to get through, and then proceeded very recklessly southbound in the northbound lanes of Legacy, at which time we needed to take more decisive action and put a stop to that so that we didn't have a head-on collision with somebody driving on Legacy Highway. So Officer Davis in the DARE vehicle made first contact with him. The DARE vehicle was hit pretty hard and disabled. It broke the linkage on one of the tires, the tie rod, and put him out of commission. Officer Casey, Preston Casey, attempted to perform pit maneuvers and force him off. He got by him, and Officer Jackson had stopped traffic on Legacy Highway back quite a ways, and the suspect was continuing. At this point, he's on just rims, all 4 rims, and going 40 miles an hour in the wrong direction. Officer Jackson was able to hit him, force him into the median, at which point he continued to try and gun the engine and to get out of the median. Ignoring commands, he immediately ignited a brush fire, and at that time officers converged from UHP. More Centerville officers arrived, and Davis County Sheriff's deputies arrived. At one point, we were able to get Officer Jackson out of the way. He was in a crossfire situation. We were trying to give commands, and for reasons, because the investigation is still active, and the Utah Highway Patrol trooper that fired some shots has not been interviewed yet, per the policy of the critical incident protocol team. I'm not able to answer a lot of those questions yet as to why shots were fired by the trooper, but we have an agreement with the Davis County Attorney's Office. We are part of the critical incident protocol team and have done many shooting reviews. Our detective division has done that a lot, very seasoned in it and experienced. We are the venue agency. We're the jurisdiction where it occurred, so we're the lead agency, and then we have detectives throughout the county working on this and gathering all of the information. All the officers have been interviewed that were there except for the UHP trooper that fired the shots. The victim was deceased on scene, and we're continuing that investigation and hope to have some answers, more answers, and a conclusion. The goal is in these is within 2 weeks. The case will be totally put together. There's a lot of video, in-car cameras, body cameras, all of the witnesses. We received just this afternoon a witness that came forward that had snapped photographs and tried to get video, as she was part of the people that were stuck there, stopped, waiting to see what had happened. So we're just we'll put that all together. It'll be put into a presentation, and that will be given to the Davis County Attorney's Office. It's usually 2 or 3 attorneys for their review, and they'll make a decision on the shooting, and we'll go from that point. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have if I can, and if I can't, I'll let you know.
Thank you for that report. We appreciate that. It's a somber reminder of the great service that you and the officers provide to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll excuse officers unless they want to stay. We've got some exciting land use items on our agenda if you'd like. But if not, we'll excuse you, and thanks a lot. Next on our agenda is the open session, an opportunity for any member of the public, to comment on any subject of municipal concern. So I'll open that up, and it looks like we've got a couple that want to speak. We'll hear from Dale first, and then from Phil, and open it up to the group.
Thank you. I'm Dale McIntyre. I live in Centerville. I just wanted to commend and thank our Centerville Police Department. The 4th of July is a difficult time for them when nothing exciting happens, and they put their lives on the line in a situation where it could have been been catastrophic. And I'm grateful for them.
Thank you. Phil, did you want to speak, please?
My name is Phil Sessions, and in case you're wondering how I fit in with William R. Smith, he is my great-grandfather, and I have a great interest in the park. And in reading this book, I have a hard time knowing anything about this park. It is, I would like to try and straighten some of it out before you vote, if I may. First of all, it says 1969, the first park in Centerville was developed on a piece of land located at 300 North, 100 East in the community, which is right. The park was originally developed by the Centerville J.C.'s and other volunteers, which is correct. The park's original name was William Reed Smith Park. Since 1.45 acres on the north side of the park was originally the farm of William R. Smith, an early developer, community, and church leader. This portion of land was, the original Smith farm was deeded to Davis County on April 6th, 1934. That is not correct. It was 1955. 1934 is a year after the flood. In 1989, the suggestion was made to change the park's name to Founders Park to honor the early settlers in the community, including its various names. If we change the name of this, let's change the name of Smoot Park. What's the difference? This park property was donated to honor David F. Smith's father. And it was signed with the Davis County Commission. Gene Tolman was the commissioner in charge. I actually read it, and it said that if this property ever ceased to be a park, that it would be returned to the Smith heirs. And it farther goes on to say that it was 1969 when it was completed. Wallace Walton was mayor from 1950 to 1957. Here's some of the things he accomplished. Relocated the city dump, supervised the creation of Founders Park, Now, what happened between 1957 and 1969, that's got to be wrong. That's got to be 1959. And the JC started the park, and we started the north half and got it partly finished, and the city purchased the south half from Marlowe Fisher. They traded him 3 building lots upon Island View subdivision. Is how they got that. And this further states that Dean Argyle was the mayor when they changed the name of the park, and I don't think that's right. I personally delivered a petition with 200 signatures on it and handed it to Michael Carey. So I know that isn't right. And I think you ought to get to the bottom of this and understand what has taken place over the years before you cast a vote, not renaming it like it should be. Now there's a little piece of property that's minus out here where they redid Parish Lane. Who signed for that? Who done away with that out of the park? The city? The county? Who did it?
I don't know the answer to that.
But I think you ought to rename the park back to William R. Smith Park, as it originally was supposed to be. If it hadn't have been for that, there would be no park.
Thank you for sharing that information with us, Phil. That was really interesting. Lots of interesting information I was not aware of.
My name is Marilyn Beckman, a longtime resident of Centerville, but I am not a Smith and never was a Smith. Although as a child, I played on the north side of the park when it was Smith property. We rode horses there, and as a young adult, I was in family get-togethers where my mother's cousins commented how the family was giving the land to the county for a park, and it would be named the Smith Family Park. So as a child, as a young person, I remember that. Now, as a resident of Centerville, I've been fine calling it the Cowboy and Indian Park. I've been fine calling it the Founders Park. But I think in as much as we have parks named for families, that maybe we need to address the original gift that was given, and that we need to look back to whether we need to honor that agreement in some way by either changing the name of the park or compromising, but that something needs to at least honor the original agreement that was made.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, my name is Shauna Essig, and I have written a letter about an hour ago. I remembered that I had promised a past young woman that I would write the city a letter. And so could I just have these passed out and I'll read it, if that's okay. Honorable Mayor, Council, men and women. First of all, I want to thank you for your wonderful service. We are very grateful for the personal sacrifice you put in making our community so much better. We know it's a sacrifice, and you're doing a wonderful job. I have a proposal concerning the Centerville Smith Founder Park. In doing the research for the Centerville City
Shauna,
Park,
can you lift the microphone up just a little so
Yes.
that
Is
when
that
George
better?
watches this on YouTube, he can hear you?
Okay, who's George?
He's our missing council
Okay.
member.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
In doing the research for the Centerville City Park, or Centerville City book, it was my privilege to research and write on the chapters. And as you can see, it wasn't perfect. But I am here because of what a treasured experience it was, and one that I will always cherish. And it has instilled in me a great love for our precious community. In doing so, though, I did find my heartstrings tugged at when it did come to our beautiful park that we've just celebrated the 4th of July at. There are some tender stories of how Centerville City officials overlooked what the name had been in the William R. Smith family. And in a way, their dignity has been robbed. Their ancestor, William R. Smith, who was a prominent citizen, who loved and served the early founders and their families, his son had a family farm and donated that to the city with the agreement that it would be named Smoot Park. Later, I was surprised to see the contest come out to change the name of the park, and I was confused by it. One of the descendants sent in the winning name of the Founders Park to be changed because she felt that her grandfather or great-great-grandfather would love that the other early settlers, but the family was so offended by her suggestion that she's since moved to Arizona, and it's caused some really deep hurt feelings among the family. And even in interviewing Phil, he even shared that his sister on her deathbed pled with him to do all that he could to change the name back to the rightful Smith Park. So many very good and wonderful citizens from their families still are here and have been deeply offended. And I'm just here to ask what harm it would do to make it right and to make the Smith Park come back and then have the Founders Pavilion and let it bring peace back to all of the Centerville citizens' hearts. Like Martin Luther King, I have a dream that it could be a very cherished and really far more appreciated than it is now, the pavilion. It's such a lovely accent to the park and is an amazing facility. But it could be enhanced by having the pillars have a bronze plaque with a picture and a short write-up about each of the settlers, one by one being honored at 1 year at a time, and have that Founders Pavilion really have an endearing place to many descendants of each one of the founders. But give back to the Smith family that name of the entire park, but have the pavilion be the Founders Park. Each year, one of the ancestors could be honored, and one night being that, as well as highlighted on the 4th of July. It would make Centerville cherished by those families who come to honor their ancestors, and it would make a win-win in our community and in our situation. You have my very best regards as you consider this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shauna. Wonderful idea. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Corey. Unusual, but we'll take it.
Just want to take 30 seconds. As a family member who has a family member that struggles in mental illness and the tragedies that occurred over the 4th of July, I hope that in our hearts and our minds that we at least pray for the family to hear the information and find their closure on a behavior that they probably have a difficult time understanding. And so I just want to share that. That would be my hope, that they can at least find whatever closure they see fit for themselves. And thank you for letting me indulge.
Thank you, Corey. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Tim, you're welcome to speak now. We're considering items later in the agenda, but there won't be a public hearing on that. So if you want to speak, or will there? No, there will not be. So if you want to speak on those, now's a good time.
Okay, I just wanted to thank Corey.
And can you state your name?
I'm Timothy Flannery from A Cleaner Image, 136 Parish Lane in Centerville. I was convicted of operating without a business license, and I paid that civil penalty or criminal penalty. And the city, on behalf of me and through consultation with Corey and Ms. Romney, have sought to amend the charter that might allow somebody in my predicament to go forward. And I would recommend to the council that they adopt that ordinance in its entirety and know that I am in compliance with all the remedies that Ms. Romney and Corey set forth. I've paid the fine. I've got a letter from the state saying that I'm in good standing, that my license is active. I've got copies of my taxes. I got copies of the criminal citation where I went before the judge. I've called the fire department, and they sent me a copy of their latest inspection. I think everything on the list, the stipulations, I have met. But I would just ask the council that, one, beg for your forgiveness, and two, let you know that it won't happen again. And maybe three, I mean, perhaps, you know what really got my attention is when the police officer showed up at my door. And I would think with those licenses expiring on January 2nd, if the city just said, you know what, February 2nd, so these people haven't renewed, and just send an officer out there and give them a ticket, and we wouldn't have had to put Lisa to all this trouble and Corey to all this trouble, and they certainly would have gotten my attention, and it would have been remedied right away. But in lieu of that, I would ask the council if they would consider the amendment to the charter as Lisa and Corey have set forth, and know that I'm in compliance today and will remain in compliance. I don't know what else to say other than I believe I've met that list, that criteria, and I just want to thank the council and the mayor and the city attorney and Corey for giving me that chance. I'm a first-time offender and a last-time offender.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flannery. Looking forward to having that discussion in a few minutes. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the open session. We'll turn to the rest of the business on our agenda, and appreciate the effort that each of you made to prepare and come and speak to us tonight. We don't have the name change on our agenda tonight, but I think that's an innovative suggestion that was made. A nice way to recognize all of the founders. So, and Phil, thank you for that education.
Mayor, there is mention under city manager's report of direction regarding that matter. So, because the minutes last time weren't clear to me, I wasn't here at the time you discussed it. So, I'm just seeking some direction later. That is on the agenda, but direction as to the process from here forward.
Thank you. We have a couple of sets of minutes to review, the June 20th work session and minutes, and the regular city council meetings minutes from that same night. Anyone have any changes to either of those sets of minutes? I didn't have any changes.
I move that we approve June 20th, 2017 work session and regular council meeting minutes.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. We have a couple items on the summary action calendar. a bid for $50,000 and $162.50 for labor, and to Western Waterworks $25,374.46 plus tax for materials for the Legacy Crossing storage water line, and an award the bid to Twin D for drainage maintenance, which resulted in some much better prices than we've had in the past, which is good. Any questions about those summary action items? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2 items on the summary action calendar.
So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. We approve the items on the summary action calendar. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up, we'll have here a staff report from, I assume from Corey, from Cassie, on the zone map amendment for 2026 North Main. Chad Morris, applicant, who is, and then after we hear the staff report, we'll give the applicant a chance to speak if you'd like.
Cassie, is there a little cap for the microphone lying on the side there or down underneath or anything? Because I think that's part of why you're picking up the...
You gave yours up, and
Where'd yours go?
I gave it to that now. Or I would offer again.
need to find some super glue.
Just actual map would be easier to see.
And there's a pointer right here if you need it. Cassie, this...
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. So this is a zoning map amendment application at 2026 North Main Street. The property owner is the Norma Moss Trust, and the applicant is Chad Morris. So it's currently in a agricultural low zone. It is about just over an acre in size, and right on the corner of 1250 North and Main. So the application is to switch it to a residential low zoning, which would allow 4 acres, possibly, or sorry, not 4 acres, 4 lots, possibly 5, including the half streets. The applicant's site proposals right now are looking at closer to 4. On the property currently is a home that is on the significant sites list, which is one of our historical architectural homes list. The home was built in 1896, so a very, very old home that has some historic architecture to it that's called a significant site. In looking at, yeah, you can zoom in a little bit. Yep, okay, right here. Thank you. Okay, here we go. That is the lot right there. So in considering a zoning map amendment, we look at the general plan. This is in Neighborhood 3, the Northeast Neighborhood Plan, which dictates that all of this neighborhood on the east side of Main here will be single-family lots, low residential. Both agricultural low and residential low are considered low density for our city, being 4 units an acre is the base density, so residential low would still fit into that category. So here's the property. As you can see, most of the surrounding properties are already residential low. Across the street here is an LDS church. Close by is the elementary school. And then these properties right to the south of it are technically zoned agricultural low, but they are all less than a half-acre lot. So if they were considered today, they would actually be also residential low based on their size, since we do have a minimum lot requirement for AL. So almost completely surrounded by residential low. So on June 14th, the Planning Commission made a motion to recommend approval for the zoning map amendment.
Cassie, a couple of questions for you. Tonight we're only looking at the zoning change. I assume the subdivision, if the applicant chose to subdivide this, would come back, and things like the orientation of the lots would be brought back to the, to the city council, and how those would access the city streets, et cetera.
Yep.
And second, I think this was asked last time, when we have a situation like this where we have land that's being converted from agricultural low to residential low, and we have adjacent lots that are clearly not in compliance with the agricultural law. Did the Planning Commission discuss the idea of doing a proactive zoning change to change those to residential low at the same time to bring them more into compliance with our standards?
That was not in the discussion for this property in and of itself, no.
And I remember we discussed that last time with Corey, but I don't remember what the answer was. If there was what would prompt us to correct something like that?
Kind of what's difficult is you have a applicant that comes in representing their property, and they're not trying to represent their neighbors.
Right.
So this discussion was the commission on another item that you'll later see, probably your next agenda. But the discussion or the question is if we find a situation that would warrant considering changing the zoning on surrounding properties, how would that take place? And the city can initiate, the city council or the planning commission can initiate a change that they feel is appropriate. The difference between initiation and a petition, the petition, the owner has representing that this is their request. Initiation of the city is you're unsure at this point in time what the actual property owner's opinion is. And so we invite them as part of the public process, as well as the state requirement is that we give any city-initiated application, we have to give individual notice to all properties in that petition and invite them to the hearings to share what they want. So in this case, we're just representing what the petitioner requested. If you see something that should come back either now, later, whatever you feel is the appropriate time, and decide that the city needs to initiate that, there is a process to handle that.
So quick question to that point. It's zoned agricultural low, but being less than a half acre, if they wanted to have one large animal, for instance, would that not be allowed because it doesn't meet the 0.5?
The points are based on per acre, and so you have 100 points for a full acre. The question will be is what was the property being used for previously, because we have to define, is there any nonconformities associated with something? So if it's like a quarter acre lot and it's supposed to be a half acre, we have to evaluate that first. But let's just assume it's 3/4 of an acre. They may have a non-conforming right for animals, and animals it's 50 points for a large animal. So they would have 70, they'd have, well, whatever, 3/4 of 50 points. Yeah. So they could get one animal plus a few chickens. Or geese or rabbits. Or
geese, because chickens are loud anyway.
Yeah. So, so depending on their nonconformity status, based on lower, higher, we would take that into account. But they could still potentially be eligible for something.
Thank you. Didn't mean to derail the discussion too much there. Anyone else on the council have just questions for staff?
Yes. Did you say, Cassie, 4 or 5 lots, or did you say 4? It wouldn't qualify for 5, would it?
Just including the half-street calculation that's included in gross density, it could possibly have 5. I didn't have like the exact half-street calculations, but assuming it might make it to 1/4 of an acre with the half-street. But currently it's an acre, so it definitely has 4. It would be pretty tight to fit 5, but that's how the gross density is calculated with the half-street.
Any other questions for staff? If not, to give the applicant an opportunity if you would like to say anything about this application.
Chad Morris. This property kind of first came to my attention a few months ago. And I'm a real estate agent, but I often have people in Centerville asking about lots and about if they could move from Centerville to Centerville and build homes. And right now it's a really tough thing to do. There's not a lot of building sites per se for people, Centerville residents, to take. And so I feel like this would be, at least, even though it's a very small part, it gives an opportunity. And like I've said, I've had already probably 5 or 6 people come up to me and ask what I'm doing with that, if they could possibly have purchase a lot. It gives them an opportunity to stay in Centerville, because I think Centerville is a very family-oriented city. And I don't know if I grew up in Centerville. I know many of you did. And people who are in Centerville love Centerville. They want to stay. And this gives them a great opportunity to do that. And also for children to come and stay in Centerville, which is exactly what my family did. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this. So, any questions for me?
Actually, because it is a significant site, would you be willing to have the Landmarks Commission come take pictures of it before you do anything? That's totally unconnected to this petition, but just to think of that.
Well, it's required by law, isn't it? If
I don't know that a
demolish it.
significant site is required.
Only historic.
I think a historic site that's already on the register is.
That's what my understanding is as well.
But I'm
Just
sure
the
they would love to
historical.
be able to come and take some pictures prior to any changes.
Yeah, in fact, my goal is to kind of keep the house there. I have had contractors over there to see what needs to be done. It's an old house, so I'm trying as much as I can. I like to keep things intact, but yeah, I think if they'd like to come take pictures, it wouldn't be up to me. It'd be up to Norma. So.
Any other questions for the applicant? If not, this matter is scheduled for a public hearing. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing and ask any member of the public if they'd like to comment on this application for a rezone from agricultural low to residential low, and remind all of us this is not an application for subdivision, just the application for rezoning from agricultural low to residential low. Anyone who would like to speak to this? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for discussion or questions.
Does this create an automatic flag lot issue?
I'm not sure if Cassie or Corey could speak to that, the width of the lots and orientation.
No, it doesn't. So Chad has brought to us a few ideas. Obviously, none of them are in the subdivision stage quite yet, and none of them had flag lots in them. It was kind of a maybe 1 and 3 situation, 1 lot on Main and then 3 on 2050, as I recall. But he had a few configurations, all with 4 lots, again with his intention to preserve the home. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. But all of the ones that we've seen so far, not in an application stage, have been 4 with no flag lots.
Okay.
All right, and I'll just say, again, as I have in past situations like this one, as much as we treasure our remaining agricultural low areas and the owners who desire to keep it that way, all of us who live in a home in Centerville are living on something that was once agricultural land. And so I feel very comfortable with moving to adopt ordinance number 2017-15, amending Centerville zoning map by changing the zoning of this property at 2026 North Main Street from agricultural low to residential low, based on the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission.
That sounds like a motion.
I said I so move to feel comfortable to move.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
Second. Although
Further discussion?
I really hate to see the ag land go. I have to be honest.
I think we all do.
But it's a good opportunity.
Further comments or questions? If not, let's vote on this since this is a zoning change. Let's start a roll call vote with Tammy.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you very much. we'll look to see, I guess, to see more information about your plans in the coming weeks and months. And we appreciate that's my neighborhood where I live in and grew up, and I appreciate all the efforts over the years that the Mosses have made to make that a beautiful place, and adds a lot of character to that to our neighborhood. Next item on our agenda is another zoning change. This one at 885 North, 610 East, with Mr. Bill Davies as the applicant. Corey, you realize that Cassie's batting 1,000, that we haven't ever turned down one of her applications.
No, you haven't.
And
that's why I told Mr. Davies it's a 50-50 shot with me. He says, that's all right. I go to Idaho and Wendover every once in a while. Let's see, where we're at, right here. That's where we're located at. Items, is it 4 and 5? Mr. Davies, are 4 and 5? They have the same story, but you're looking at two different proposals. So the first coming in is the second is hitched to this first idea. So if the first idea doesn't take place, then obviously it affects the second idea.
And you're going to tell us how this ended up as agricultural law.
I don't have all the full story, but I can deduce with some records and things we found out. Mr. Davies has his home here. I hope that's correct. And he also happens to have ownership of the lot behind. The lot behind, just for interesting sake, is zoned agricultural low, but it is 0.42 acres. And if you recall, our agricultural low requires a minimum half acre. It's the only zone that we do not do gross density. So the net lot is to be a half acre. So we're below that. Whatever historic time is where I have a gap in understanding how we got to that point. What we do know, to some extent, is the lot owner of the home purchased this at some point in time in historic past and added it to the use of the property. Then subsequently, through the times, Rockwood Farms, Rockwood Gardens, Rockwood Gardens, Rockwood Farms were developed and subdivided. And this became a remnant. It became a remnant because it was purchased, but during the subdivision of the parent parcel, the accounting for that remnant didn't take place. And probably, we get more and more stringent as each decade goes on, so I would assume somebody owned it, so we didn't include it in giving it a recognition of approval from the city to existence, and just subdivided around, and that just left it as a remnant. Well, by state law, that is not recognized as having a development right. So the property was purchased for ownership. That is true and correct. Assigning it a development right is the subdivision process and the zoning ordinances. That assigns the development right to the property. So you have to be in compliance with those ordinances to have a right. So this property currently does not have a right, and the desire of the owner is to secure a right for the land and sell it off. So what you have tonight is the rezone request. It's in the same neighborhood as you looked at before. It is zoned AL, but it is not compliant with the AL requirements. And I don't foresee a way, unless somebody gives up their other house lot property, to bring this into compliance. And so it will remain as a remnant parcel unless it is rezoned for the foreseeable future. So the low density is agricultural low and residential low for this neighborhood plan. So it is consistent with that policy. It's surrounded by subdivisions, and so it does have the utilities in the area. But like all subdivision lots, to render it as a development right, it would have to comply with the zoning. That's why the rezone, and would have to go through the process to pay its fair share of the impact fees that are associated with typically in subdivisions that are transferred later in the sale of the lot. So we do have the drainage utility fees, hooking up the water, paying the water development fee, and then when the home's built, if it gets a development right, we collect the fire and the park impact fee afterwards. So that's the request before you, is will you rezone it to RL from the AL, And if you do, then the next item is the plat amendment process and determining if it meets that criteria.
Thank you. The applicant is here. Mr. Davies, anything you'd like to add to that?
So this is one of those situations where it's agricultural, but there's nothing more than a vegetable garden going on there. And in fact, most years that's not even very successful. It's mostly just a playground for the kids, and they've all grown up and gone. This is actually step one, because there's a buyer sitting right there who wants to build a home there, and then we'll sell our home and go get something we can manage. We're too old to be rattling around a 7,500 square foot home. So that's why it's happening. Craig Bueller built the home we're in. When Charlie decided he was going to subdivide up there, Craig went and said, sell me a half acre so I can put my horse there. Then things changed in their life and they needed to explore, and we're headed to Portland, and we bought the home from them. And the lot, in fact, behind, and it has its own parcel number, was the only point of negotiation in purchasing the house. I offered him more money than he asked to buy the lot with it, and he said, no, it's not for sale. Until he went to Portland, found out how much his new home was going to cost, and then it was for sale. So that's how it happened.
Any questions for the applicant before we hold a required public hearing on this? Thank you very much. This is also scheduled for a public hearing, and I'll open it up. Anyone who would like to comment on this proposed zoning change from agricultural low to residential low? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and turn to the council for discussion on, or a motion on ordinance 2017-16 before we go to step 2.
Well, this one's even easier than the last one, so I move that we adopt ordinance number 2017-16 to amend the Centerville zoning map by changing the zoning of the .42 acres at 885 North, 610 East from agricultural low to residential low based on the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve ordinance 2017-16, approving this zoning change. Any further discussion? Let's start the voting with Robin.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. That's step 1. We'll change it to agricultural low. Now we need to talk about the plat amendment.
Residential.
Or excuse me, residential low, from agricultural to residential.
So 51% now success rate. If we can make it to 51.5 with the next item. The interesting part about this predicament is how do you create a development right when there's no real parent parcel to subdivide, and a one-lot subdivision is kind of like saying frozen ice. And so it's a little bit difficult. Fortuitous, to my understanding, is there will be some slight lot line adjustment between the property and the home. And so that cues in the best way to handle that lot line adjustment is use the plat amendment process. So you're familiar with Duncan Hills when they adjusted lot 9 and created a lot 10, but they incorporated much more of the raw ground into the original lot. We selected that as the process to render this a potential for a development right. So what they like to do is take the lot in the subdivision, amend that lot and its boundaries slightly, and add this property into that amended subdivision plat. Fortuitous of using that is that this bypasses the Planning Commission's looking at the larger subdivision and the streets and the drainage and so forth that they typically do. So depending on how you view that, that can be good or bad. But fortuitous to the petitioner, this is a great thing because it's a one-step shop to come to the council and get the rezone and the plat amendment if you approve the plat amendment. So what I'd like to do is adjust that boundary slightly, amend the plat. This will create that now the raw ground will be in a platted subdivision. As part of the recording process, they would pay the normal applicable development fees at subdivision to record it, and then afterwards, it would then be able to skip, instead of going to the Planning Commission for a meets and bounds lot for that, it will skip right to the building permit process, and it'll be administrative approval by staff to issue the permit, and that's pending you approve it. 2 criteria under state: is there a good cause, and will anybody be materially injured? And our review at a staff level is we believe it meets that criteria, so we're recommending approval.
Thank you. Any questions for staff on this?
So I happen to be pretty familiar with the neighborhood because that's close to me. What happens in a situation like this where now the property sits behind a fence, so I can't see it real well, but the land drops off very quickly from the street level. So what happens in the development of that?
You're right, it's in the hillside, so we have additional review that occurs under the hillside ordinance for that drop-off, and so there'll be evaluation of the drop-off. We have to handle the drainage so that there is the surface water that's being created by the hard surface is captured. So typically, when you see the infill lots, they're creating, as part of their plan, some type of surface water detention facility and berming it and landscaping it, and that becomes a permanent feature of the landscape in development of the house. The second thing will be looking at how steep the grade is and how the driveway access is going to work, because we allow a 12% slope for driveways, so depending on what they want to do and how that drainage for the driveway surface will handle to be part of their design engineering for the building permit. And the other thing is there's a variation on a sloped lot on how you measure building height. And so you often see that the lesser height is on the upside and the greater height is on the downside. And if you average all 4 elevations, they have to meet the 30-foot midpoint of roof height requirement. So that could affect how they do multiple stories given the slope of the land.
Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to say anything about this phase of the plat amendment? You don't have to.
Good use of the elbow there.
No, I don't really want to say anything. So what happened when Charlie, we'll finish the story. So the power and the cable and the telephone, whoever has telephone lines anymore, and the secondary water and all of that was done. What we uncovered in searching is that there's a sewer lateral that's going to have to be installed and a water lateral, and Kevin has said he'll tell us how much we're going to escrow to make sure that happens, so that we can get them done. But that's what they're planning on.
All right, thank you. This is also scheduled for a public hearing on the plat amendment, so I'll open that and invite anyone who wishes to speak to comment on this plat amendment. Anyone who would like to comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for action. There's no ordinance number here. I assume just a motion to approve the plat amendment is sufficient.
Anybody else want to turn, or should I go again?
I'm reading off of Robin's because mine has crashed and my
right.
cord isn't doing it. So
Really
go ahead and do it.
I'll go for it.
right,
I would move that we approve the plat amendment for the Rockwood Gardens subdivision as has been described.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the plat amendment for the Rockwood Gardens subdivision plat lot 1 and adjacent parcel. Any further discussion?
And subject to the conditions in the staff report?
Subject to
And the
conditions in the
findings.
staff report.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. I can't think of a better choice than to have the Henrys as neighbors. All right, we're making good progress here. Down to number 6 on the agenda, which is municipal code amendments. And Lisa, I believe you have the staff report on this.
Sure, I'm happy to give a little introduction to this. As you know,
Great.
we've been working with Mr. Flannery on his business, but I think this also raised a number of issues as staff was trying to work with the ordinances and reviewing those. Obviously, a business license expires if the fees and the paperwork is not completed by January 2nd to accommodate the January 1st holiday. But essentially that means that you can't open your business on January 3rd because now you have an expired business license. But staff has also, our ordinances say, but if you pay your business license fees by February 28th with a penalty, okay, or March, you even get till April with a 100% penalty. So there's this period of time. And so as I was talking with Corey, the way we would like to interpret those ordinances is essentially your business license expires on January 3rd if you failed to pay your fees, but it's basically inactive pending the payment of the fees. It's not officially revoked because if you go to that section, there's a little bit more stricter requirements, which eventually after 2 years in this situation of not paying your business license fees, we had to go to that level. But what we like about officially revoking a business license fee is, or business license after non-payment of fees for an extensive period of time, is that it provides a due process. If we just said the business license expires and there's no remedy on January 3rd, the ordinances don't even provide for an appeal. So that argument was kind of raised as we were dealing with this, and I think it was a legitimate issue with our ordinances, but the way that, I think why we took a more proactive stance here was that we thought that we could make the ordinances a little bit more clear about what happens during that time period where you can pay your late fees. And so I've put in this ordinance that clearly you can pay your late fees, but it's inactive during that time. And then if it's still late after April 1st, then we can go to the revocation. And so we've added in all of that, and then also added in the idea that Corey came up with of allowing the one-time waiver of that 12-month period. So our ordinances do say, and we've talked about the policy reason behind that if your license is actually revoked, you need to wait 12 months before you can get another business license, because it's very costly for the city to go through revocations, and so we have that waiting period. But I think as this situation has brought to light a few circumstances that there might be good reason, if you're willing to pay all your delinquent fees, settle all the criminal cases, or pay your civil fines, make sure you're in good standing with the state, then you get a one-time exclusion from that 12-month prohibition. And then the procedure that we've put in place is that request would have to come to the city council. So you would make that decision after having a public hearing. And I did put in the public hearing because I think there may be some other interests when you revoke a business license. I mean, this one was just for failure to pay fees, but business licenses may be revoked for a number of other reasons, and this actually applies to any reason that it's revoked, this exclusion, not just for failure to pay your business license fees.
So if somebody else did something else that caused the revocation, this could apply.
Right. So with that, I'm happy to walk through the edits line by line, or if you've read your report, I'm happy to answer any questions as well. But I think as I say in conclusion, though, that this is a win-win. I think for staff, we feel like our ordinances are clearer, and it also provides a one-time exemption or exception for certain business owners that want to continue to conduct business in the city.
Thanks, Lisa. I want to thank you and Corey for your efforts to try to find a fair solution to this challenging problem. I appreciate you working together and trying to come up with a way that stays true to the need we have to be able to handle these situations, but also provides a way for Mr. Flannery or somebody similar in a similar situation to take care of this issue without the 12-month duplication. I fully support this and think it's a good idea.
I have a few questions. I agree that it can be a win-win and that it's an improvement to the ordinance. I have a couple of concerns. In Section 2, 6.02010, the amendment, the added line, if a business license has expired or is suspended or revoked, the licensee shall be required to pay all delinquent business licensee fees, penalties, and interest due and owing to the city prior to renewal of the expired license or issuance of a new business license in the case of a revoked license. My question is, could we get a clearer definition of licensee? So is that the corporation or the business name or the individual? Because as you've said to us, one of the past problems has been that we just change business name and get a new license and then get in trouble again and change business name and get a new license.
So what I went ahead and used the defined term, so it does say it is unlawful for any person. And so the person is defined at the beginning of the business licensing, Chapter 1 of Title 6, and it is any person or entity, business entity, LLC, etc. So
it could be interpreted as one or the other, and so is that a possible loophole that's being created?
Well,
there?
I think that I debated whether to change that or not and tighten it up, but I decided that it's already difficult. I mean, if we leave it the way it is, let's take this example, a Cleaner Image, they would have to change their business name because their business license is under that LLC, I believe. So they would have to, in my opinion, they would have to change the LLC name to another business. And whether or not that person includes, like sometimes on an LLC, you might have a primary member. I did not get into that kind of detail. But arguably, someone else could open up a similar business at the same location.
Could the same person open up a similar business under a new name? Because it could be interpreted that the licensee is the business name, the business entity.
Arguably, but they would have to, yes, I think they could if they come up with a new LLC, but then they have to go file with the state, they have to change all their licensing, so they could, but,
But it's the same problem that we've experienced in the past that we're trying to prevent, right? Where if there's some sort of untoward behavior by a business, which is the reason we have these ordinances in place, and then we go through the process, and then now we've tightened our ordinance but created a loophole where it actually could just
Isn't that solved a little bit later where you identify that you tie it back to a person under the qualification?
Well, for the request for reduction, it's still the same person that has had a business license. And again, I'm using the defined term, which would mean anybody that has applied, whoever the business license name is. I guess we could interpret that more broadly and say, well, the person also includes the main entity, but I think to really enforce that, we'd probably have to get a little more specific.
Right, and I sense what you're pointing to, but I think it's difficult under the state regulations and business licensing. You got your sole proprietorship, you got your LLC, you have your corporation, and there's obviously various versions to that. Even at the state level, it's difficult for them to hold a business entity accountable above and beyond the way it's been formed. And so, creating, my first response is we're not going to have a lot of these, I hope. I mean, I really cross my fingers that we don't have a lot of these. Second, I think when you start going outside the parameter of the definition of businesses and start trying to hitch it that, I found that your sister company's cousin's friend is associated and they're the one that used to own the business, it gets very difficult. We have that problem, not to bring up bad stuff, with Walmart and sister company sales and what they can do in business. It gets very, very legally uncomfortable. I think the saving grace of this is it's 12 months. And the directive at the end is if you do find a reason to want to open it up, you don't have to immediately say tomorrow. You give a directive on the time frame and the conditions for it to happen. So it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months, it could be pending this outcome, pending that the next entity is in good standing and doesn't have a criminal history that you're just giving it to in order to get around the loophole. There'll always be a loophole. The issue will be is getting to the revocation point is trying to correct an action and a behavior, and if that gets corrected, then they have a right to appear before you and see if they can get out of the suspension or the 12-month prohibition clause. And if it's not to your satisfaction, the alcohol services, and they violated the alcohol laws of the state of Utah and have a blatant history of doing that, and we go ahead and revoke it, I don't see you coming here and giving in the next day and opening up business. So, yeah, there's a loophole, but I think it's pretty far down the road to use.
Okay.
Thanks.
I have a couple others.
Okay.
So then in the qualifications section, line 3, qualification 3, the person must pay for all delinquent or pending civil or criminal penalties. And so when I first read that, I took that as all. So if there are any civil or criminal, anything outstanding. But then it says...
Tammy, where are you exactly so we can put it on the screen?
603-102, request for reduction in license restriction. And there's an A, B, and a B, and the B is the qualifications, and then I'm on qualification number 3.
Okay.
The person must pay for all delinquent or pending civil or criminal penalties and settle or conclude any such civil or criminal enforcement actions with the city. So then I wasn't sure if we're saying only if the civil or criminal penalty is something to do with the city and in party with the city.
These are great points because I struggled as I was drafting these on both of these. And on that one, in my opinion, I just decided to tie it to civil and criminal penalties with the city. I mean, I debated because I thought, if they have a pending suit or something with the state, I worry about overreaching regulation, and I thought, really what we're trying to get at is our businesses and make sure that, because I was thinking of the tobacco shop, and actually I think we were part of that case, because I was debating, because I know Davis County got involved because it was more of a felony, but we had been part of the initiation, so I felt like that was more of a tie, and I just didn't want to throw this huge net out and say, yeah, if you have any sort of lawsuit with any governmental entity, you can't have a Centerville business license.
The reason I would lean towards throwing that net out is because if we already have a business that's had a problem and then we discover that there's a wider problem, I think that's indicative that the problem isn't necessarily.
I mean, if you wanted to do that, I would say a number of times here I tried to say limited to this business license or this business location, which is another defined term. So if you wanted to limit and say, okay, fine, you have to settle all suits and all enforcement actions regarding this business and or this location.
But let's take the scenario where you've got the Department of Consumer Protection, and it's fairly easy to lodge a complaint against a business, whether it's grounds or not.
Whether it's fair or not.
Whether it's fair or not, and have let's say an investigation going.
Yeah, I felt like that was covered in number 4.
Do we want to get involved in that?
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I felt like that was covered in number 4 because it does say that they must show that it's in good standing with the state of Utah, which would be.
That's a fair point. Number 4 covers my concern on 3. So then my last concern is just on D. I wondered, and this is decision, after holding the public hearing on the matter, the city council may approve with conditions, or deny the request for reduction. So that sounds like it gives us a lot of leeway. But then the city council shall provide written findings of its decision, including findings regarding compliance or non-compliance with the requirements to qualify for the reduction. So I felt like this worried me a little bit, that this does bind us similarly to like a conditional use permit, so that we're going through a checklist And if we have to list findings that they complied, but we still for some reason want to deny, then that puts us in a legal bind, I feel like, possibly. So I wanted your thoughts on that as well.
Well, so the reason I wanted it in writing is that, you know, we really do need to specify and provide direction to the business license official that, yes, you can reissue the license or no. So I do think that you are granting some right that the business owner would have to get a new license at that point. Beyond that, you know, if they do any additional violations, then obviously we would still have enforcement action for anything new or any failure to renew. So I don't know if you're saying, do they have long-term, you know, like a conditional use is more permanent. In my opinion, no, a business license.
No, do you just believe that this language kind of sets up a double bind because it says that we have the right to approve or deny, but then we have to write findings if they're in compliance with these requirements that we've listed out.
Compliance or non-compliance. So
let's say we find that they are in compliance, but for some reason the council does still want to deny. So is that not going to be legally possible?
And I looked at it the other way, that saying, does this give you an opportunity to say, oh, you don't have to meet these qualifications, and the city council can still kind of override that and say you don't meet one, but still give you the
I think that this would probably, I tried to set it up more as an administrative decision. If you'll see, I'm suggesting substantial evidence, so which is good and bad. I mean, it puts the burden on the applicant to show sufficient evidence that they comply, but it does take away some of the discretion of the council. So if they do comply, in my opinion, it should be granted. Whereas, you know, the legislative decision, you have far more discretion, but this really is just the issuance or non-issuance of a business license.
Yeah, that made me a little uncomfortable, that it was set up as if we could accept or deny, but then in reality, it's more like a...
But it's pretty open on the time frame, so you could even say, okay, we'll grant it, but we're only granting it for 6 months.
So if you wanted to modify, how would you modify it? Because I think we need to give direction to the building official to say, yes, you can, we approve this reduction with the following condition.
And you also, though, you need objective standards so that you can't just give it to one business but not another in similar situations.
Right.
So,
okay, well, those were the questions I had, so I just wanted to hear what your thinking was through the process. It sounds like you struggled with it as well.
Yes, there were a lot of moving parts, but I think I was just trying to strike a balance, and also thinking of appeals and rights and what kind of standards should apply. And I do think this is better as an administrative decision. I know it takes away some of your authority, but again, I think I did leave pretty open the authority for how much time. Okay. And you can also add conditions. So
I think it gives a lot of leeway. I'm not sure the council wants to be in that position all the time, but
I'm hoping not.
And as Corey said, I hope
often.
this doesn't come up very often. You know, we really don't, as staff, like to be in this position where you have to take someone's business license away.
So it may not be perfect. I think it's better than what we've got.
Yeah, it's an improvement. I agree.
We can
and just,
argue about this.
Yeah, just one point is I think it's important to call out that it would be difficult to put the person who does the revocation into the mercy spot and seat about it.
I agree.
That creates an interesting. So it's nice to have that when we do reach a revocation, you're 12 months. And if you want to appear before the council and qualify or meet the requirements, you know, as Lisa said, there are other elements out there other than just some, you didn't pay your fees. Violation of health codes, violation of the fire codes, you know, violation of the alcohol. Mm-hmm. Those are associated with it, and I think it allows an opportunity to say if you've reached this point for some of those more serious reasons, you know, you got to make a concerted effort to show that you fixed that.
And that brings up another point, because I know Corey's always worried about the objectivity and, you know, not being the judge and the jury. And on this one, I do want to point out on page 3, subsection C, it talks about penalty fees, and it does actually say that the business license official penalty fees may be appealed. So, you know, we charge the 50% penalty in February, the 75% penalty in March, and the 100% penalty in April. And it says the penalty fees may be appealed to the business license official, which I thought, that kind of puts him in a difficult position. But it also said that he could waive all. So I actually said, fine, we'll leave it with the business license official, but he can only refund up to 50%.
Yeah, I think we're fine. We have those debates with folks about noticing. You know, November, the notices are prepared. By mid-November, they've gone out. And we often get claims that they didn't get it, or went to this P.O. box, or went to this location. If they can show that, I kind of have a good relationship with Donna. She calls the shots. And I say, yeah, I agree with you. So, but I do think, you know, all is a difficult place to put it in, so we can give them some margin. So, and, you know, sometimes we just say, okay, when did you receive it? It's a day after, you know, it's 100%. We might.
That's true. So you can work with when they receive the notice.
Yeah, we probably have 10 to 15, 20 cases that come and plead their cause about when they actually got it, or it went to this mailbox, or.
So with that, maybe we do want to take it back to, that you can take it off if you feel like it's gone to the wrong mailbox.
The issue, and that's why I agree with Lisa's version of it, is that there's a lot of time Donna spends on this.
Yeah.
You know, we're bringing in, you know, $10,000 worth of fees for the year. You know, Donna spends, you know, a major 2 weeks preparing the notices going out, and spends the next 2.5 months chasing down comments.
Yeah.
You know, this is not making money.
Yeah.
That's actually my concern, is that I think that we should have a high enough standard as a city that we kind of set things up in the expectation that we don't have to babysit our businesses, right? There's a lot that goes into running a business, and you should be able to keep track of your addresses and your licensing and your due dates and things.
So I'm okay to say, yeah, you only get a 50%. That's the max we're going to give you. Pay it in.
If this comes to the city manager under appeal, however, and I determined that there was good reason that that if I'm convinced that they had good arguments, should I have the ability to waive more than 50%?
I don't think so because of sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't know you started.
I was just going to say, I would think so. I mean, if it's gone that far and you really truly feel like, I mean, maybe we did send it to a wrong address or have a wrong digit on the, you know, I worked at the post office a lot of years, so I know that sometimes things
happen, yeah.
disappear in thin air. Sorry, but they do.
So as I read this, I read that the business official can refund up to 50%, but it's not clear to me if it's appealed beyond the business official to the city manager, that there are limits on what the city manager can and can't do, and maybe it's worth clarifying that.
Yeah, typically, the appellant only has the same authority as the official person. So if you'd like to change that.
Is this really a big deal?
No, because if you're going to the city manager, it's for a denial or something of that nature.
They're not going to go and argue about $40 in fees.
And I think the point is the business fees aren't that high. They're probably not even high enough to cover the basic time to get the notices out that they're due and get the business fees back and process them.
Well,
and
I look at it this way. If I lose the case to the city manager, he's going to look at me and say, go fix it and give him his fees back.
Yeah.
So it's not a waiver.
But that's just my leaning through the whole process is the more steps we have to take, the more it costs the city. And so I don't want to get too lenient, I guess.
And I'm fine leaving that as is, or.
Well, let me just clarify though. We don't collect $10,000 in business fees. We collect about $50,000. It's about.
Oh, sorry, that's probably just the home occupations.
The home occupations is 10,000, which is now we're going to lose out because of the new law at the state level.
Sorry.
So it's about 50,000, and it's still many of the businesses are not $40. They're 40 plus a factor that is based on number of employees and the size of the facility, those kind of things, right?
That's right. I'm sorry. The 10,000 was tied to the study of loss of home occupation licensing.
This could be significant.
So clarify for me, does this paragraph C mean that regardless of what the business official finds or determines, he can only refund 50% of the penalty?
That's correct, but I think what Corey was saying is they can also do the calculation on when they received the notice.
The proper notice.
But, yeah, but, I mean, that's a reasonable, you know, if it was our fault, I hadn't thought of that, so if you just want to put it back to all or part, that's fine. They still have to make a good cause, but hopefully we're not refunding too many.
I'd like to make it really easy for Corey and Donna, so they don't have to leave a lot up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But to say if it goes past that and it gets appealed, then, you know, the city manager or the first appeals body can wipe the whole thing away. So what's the best language? Is it to insert something, the decision of the business license official and all fees and all penalty fees may be appealed to the city manager?
Yeah, just go to the last sentence and say, maybe appealed to the city manager who has the ability to waive all penalties.
Do we want to do that, or do we just want to go back to the all or part for Corey? Then we're not making it appeal.
The decision
to
of Corey is: do you want to allow us to waive up and decide not to recoup the cost for that time? I'm comfortable with the 50%, given a cause and a notice to it, but insert that it goes to the city manager and they can determine if any other reduction is warranted.
At his discretion.
I feel comfortable with the way it's written because just like I pointed out that licensee could be interpreted different ways, it could be argued that appealing the decision, which is to receive 50%, allows for an appeal.
True, of even saying that. And I'll have to look, because the appeal provision for appealing decisions to the city manager is in a different section, but so if it's already covered in that different section, it may just say any decision of the business license official may be appealed to the city manager. I wouldn't make any changes. Mm-hmm. If it's not clear, I'll just add something to C saying all penalty fee decisions may be appealed to the city manager. And I think that gives it enough.
Include that in the motion?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to do then.
So, but before you do that, I want to just understand the scenario here. So we approve the policy, we make the policy change. Mr. Flannery still, it sounds like, has got to come back next council meeting for a public hearing.
Correct.
Is that your
interpretation? Provide his evidence or, you know, something in writing will be provided to you for that meeting. As to how he meets all the criteria, and then you have a public hearing and you can make a decision.
So is he still
I'm comfortable with that.
in the meantime?
I think, yes, in the same way he's been out of business the last
2 years.
Operating without a license, yes.
In other words,
not out of business, we're just kind of looking the other way.
Well,
I've told him he's not supposed to be operating.
I think that's okay. I think it's a good compromise. It's a good effort to be merciful in an unfortunate situation, and waiting until next council meeting is shorter than 12 months, and I'm comfortable with that.
all right. Well, I think this has been a good discussion, and as mentioned, a good policy change. So. Somebody want to try to make that motion with the language that Lisa said about the appeal?
You're not going to say it all, so we can say so moved? I move that we adopt the ordinance number 2017-17, amending the business license. That's like 8 lines of blah, 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 blah. This ordinance that we've been discussing, with the change that Lisa recommended, that all business license appeals to the city can be appealed to the city manager once Corey has dealt with it. Something nice.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Robin. Further discussion on this? Not roll call vote, starting with Tammy.
Aye.
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 That passes unanimously. We look forward to seeing you Next meeting, that'll be 3 in a row.
I think I'm in compliance right now, so I'm ready for next Tuesday.
Great, and you'll provide that documentation. I
Okay.
guess, where does that go? How does that,
Yeah, to be clear, 2 weeks.
To Corey?
to Corey, the building official?
Submit it to Corey. It'll be in 2 weeks, by the way, not next week.
18th, back on Tuesday, Tuesday the 18th.
Thank you.
All right. Reorganization of the finance department.
Mayor and council, I had mentioned in the staff report that I might request a closed meeting tonight, but my thinking at this point is that that would be, as far as my request anyway, would be more appropriate for next time after I've prepared a formal job description and evaluated the position of management services director for pay grade, and then have a closed session with you to discuss the qualifications of the individual and appropriateness of the compensation. I think that's something you expressed a desire to address it, I think, in a closed session before we dealt with it publicly.
Would we also at that time be able to get a feel for what we're seeing as far as applicants for the other positions you're setting up?
Yeah,
What kind of qualifications we're seeing and interest we're getting?
Yes,
That would be
assuming,
helpful as well, I think.
well, I can't promise you that yet because I'm gone next week and Jake's gone the week after, so. And it's,
You want to just comment on
well, we're getting,
received a lot of resumes so far.
yeah, I mean, we defined the possibilities so broadly that I knew this would happen. We'd get a lot of applications. Many of them, though, are being forwarded automatically from the workforce services system because those people checked accounting or whatever, any job opening that comes up, their resume was to be forwarded. So we're getting quite a few of those. But we're also getting a fair number of those who address the city directly. They customize it there. Some of them are even Centerville residents. So there's a fair number. Yeah.
That's good.
But I'm not sure I'll be ready with
Everything.
That's
yeah,
fine.
on that one. But I do want to try and move forward within the next month with the appointment of a management services director, if we can get things in order and get you comfortable with that. So tonight, though, I think it would be appropriate, and you could do this in open session, is to talk about the reorganization proposal, if you've got questions or concerns, the organizational chart that I've provided. And then Lisa has done the analysis of the duties of what we would traditionally call the finance director, and whether those duties can be satisfied. How can those duties in the law be satisfied in ways other than just appointing a traditional finance director? So she's written that memo, which you have. Kind of in summary, my intent is that, in talking with Lisa, I think she agrees this is an acceptable way to do it, is that you, in creating the management services director position, you amend the code consistent with the agreed upon changes, then that position would have the duties required by law of a finance director, so that we have met the state law requirement. Now, this doesn't mean the management services director would have the level of accounting skill that your traditional finance director would have, but I'm very comfortable going this route as long as we have a contract with a CPA firm to provide that accounting level, that high accounting level skill. Quite frankly, most of the duties of the former finance director were other types of assignments and responsibilities, and those are embodied in the proposal for the management services director. Risk management, some HR, RDA administration, special projects, solid waste contract, those kind of things. And those responsibilities that the Management Services Director would be overseeing that involve a high level of accounting knowledge, that director would have the assistance of a CPA advisor. So I mean, we've gone now for 2-3 months since some point in April. With the CPA assisting us, I've become more comfortable and confident that that's, I think, a cost-effective way to go. But I'm glad to respond to your concerns about the proposed structure, how the duties would fall. And you may also want to ask Lisa some questions about her analysis of the finance duties, whether those can be adequately dealt with and satisfied in this arrangement.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
So Lisa's memo was very enlightening, and the roles and responsibilities of the city recorder actually astounded me. And I know that those can be delegated out, and I understand that that's your plan to a great degree, but I wondered if the idea of having either one full-time or 2 part-time employees filling the role of the city recorder, if it's maybe too intense for a part-time person, if we maybe need to give that role a little more weight and a little more value and a lot more training, and make sure that that person's really up to snuff.
Certainly the impact of state statute would imply that.
That's the impression I came away with clearly and strongly.
My impression is that, just observing across, is it requires a lot of training and very specific work, but necessarily the volume of work is not necessarily overwhelming. It's
just the precision,
the way to do it.
You know, I've worked in this position for 19 years now and worked closely with the city recorders, and I believe it can be done either with a full-time person or 2 part-time people. You have some advantages with the part-time arrangement. I think there's the very real possibility that the city recorder specific duties can be done in less than a full-time position, depending on the skill set of the person involved and the capabilities of that person. Making available some other time for some other kinds of things, possibly the public information task that Jake has been doing could be done by the city recorder. That's one of the possible scenarios that I see. So yeah, it could be a full-time position, but I don't believe that you necessarily need. I don't believe that you need the full-time for the city recorder specific duties to be done.
Could they be done in as little as part-time?
I think they could be done in less than 40 hours.
But not necessarily half-time.
But there is some assistance also from the city recorder to the city manager. So, but it's only a fraction, quite frankly, of the assistance that I required 19 years ago when I came, because so much of the correspondence is now done by email, not needing secretarial type assistance, which is what a lot of the assistance was for me from the city recorders when I first came.
How long has Marcia been recorder?
Well, since Marilyn retired, what was it, 5 years ago?
But she was the assistant. She was the recorder. We had 2 recorders.
We had a city recorder and a deputy recorder, but with technology has changed so dramatically, and also the elections function now is largely administered by the county. The impact on city staff for the election is relatively small compared to what it was 19 years ago, for example. Marilyn was doing the public information stuff, the newsletter and so on. That's been transferred to Jake in the meantime in the last 5 years. You know, I'm kind of tentatively responding to your concern because I'm just trying to keep open the options that I think we might find in a couple of part-time people, the combination of skills that will maximize the productivity there.
I'm comfortable with the fluidity of this setup, and it will just be important to be pretty intense in the focus and the follow-up of how the duties are set up and communicated especially, and so I just felt that especially strongly with the city recorder, that I didn't want 2 part-time people with a long list of really varied tasks that could kind of water down. And so I just want to state that concern, that we make sure we focus on either those 2 people or at least one person to be really strongly trained in those legal responsibilities of the recorder. And then the other question I had was on the reception clerk, 1 full-time or 2 part-time. I know that we've heard in the past that a lot of the business office manager and treasurer time was being taken to cover that need for more there.
Now, you understand that now we just have 1 part-time. So I'm saying that we would have 1 full-time or 2 part-time so that we could provide more than 4 hours a day at that front desk.
So the receptionist clerk presently has been part-time?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So that is doubling what we have now.
And then
Okay,
Janine picked up some of the, some of that function.
Right.
Okay.
And so if I could kind of give you the big picture.
that answers my question, though. We're doubling what we've had.
Yes, and
Okay,
yes, Janine was providing that backup before, and Janine was our accountant. And now we're saying because much of the accountant's duties are now transferred to the CPA firm, we really can get by with a part-time accounts payable accountant who can also be supporting the CPA contractor. But yeah, I think we will have better coverage at the front desk.
That's good.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Now, I will admit that as this gets implemented, we may conclude that, you know, we need another half a position or something to keep this well-oiled and doing well. But this is feeling pretty comfortable that we can do the job with what I'm proposing here.
Great. So the next step in this is what?
Well, I need to write a formal job description and evaluate the position for pay grade, review those things with you, and my recommendation for the position, and that I think is appropriate for a closed meeting. Hopefully I'll be ready for that next time. And I mean, you know my intent, and that's pretty clear, but this is a decision that ultimately, since it's a department head position, the mayor would recommend, I guess I recommend, but and the mayor.
I'd recommend to the council.
And then the council has to approve.
Appoint them with your
a
consent.
department head appointment. So we'll take the time that's needed for you as the council to get comfortable with that appointment ultimately when you need to make that.
Right. So the other part of your of this is that we need an interim finance director, and the appointment that you made last time
expires tonight.
Expires.
So, and Lisa's written that to give us a couple of months if necessary. My hope is that it won't take that long, but 2 months is the extension she's got
I think I
in the
put in there
resolution.
until September 5th, but you're welcome to
Change
put in
that.
a date, whatever you want.
My only question or concern is one of the reasons we were delaying this, if I recall, was we're hoping to get kind of things wrapped up with CPA firm in terms of our past finances and have that kind of in a bundle that we could say, okay, here's all our conclusions.
And you're looking at me, and one of the things I had wanted to do tonight is talk to Steve about getting a couple of things scheduled with Marcus so we could pull those things together and come back with a final report to the council. I had thought Marcus would be here tonight.
Oh, I didn't understand that you were expecting that.
Well, I just thought.
Okay.
I didn't ask. There's no, but I guess I thought that on an ongoing basis he would be around and present.
Well, you'd be here typically the second meeting of the month, because that's when the financial report would be presented to you. You could ask questions of him. So
But he wasn't here last time.
He was out of town.
Yeah, he was out of town last time. I handled the financial report last time.
So is there enough time with Steve, you being gone next week, to meet with
Yeah.
Marcus and still kind of?
Well, I don't think we can get that wrapped up by the next meeting, so.
No, but maybe not by the next meeting, but by the end of the month.
Yes, we can make that a target.
So that it's, yes, yeah. Because I'm out of town next week as well.
Okay, so let's plan on that week after next.
Following week.
So in the meantime, I assume everyone's comfortable extending the appointment of the city manager as the interim finance director.
I am, but I would like to see some formalization around Marcus on a longer term basis.
Oh, so we've got a contract with him. What do you mean?
Well, formalization about specific duties, and I still feel like there needs to be some separation between Steve and finance director on a longer term basis.
Okay.
Okay, and Steve, no insult intended.
Yeah.
It's division of duties. It's having two sets of eyes look at significant transactions, and I'd like to see, I would personally think we should have something formalized there.
Well, and that's the intent here. This CPA firm would be reporting to the management, would be assisting the management services director.
Sure, but I guess I'd like to see some formal responsibility there as the finance director, or accepting certain positions on a long-term basis, and I don't see it there.
So in this, who is designated as the city finance director?
Well, that's what her analysis was pointing out, is that you
could not.
You would require of the management services director that you would assign to him the responsibilities under law that fall with the finance director. But the CPA firm is under contract to assist the management services director.
Right, except for those duties that can be delegated. And if you look at those are really ones that the accounting firm are doing. So they fit nicely with, preparing the final report and doing some of those. So if you want more formalization, but I think the way we had it before, the finance director / assistant city manager. So what I'm saying is, if your management service director is also your finance director, and that position performs all the duties of the finance director, that's clearly allowed under the law. And then you can either have the accounting firm report to that person, and, because certainly you can delegate as long as the finance director has the final say, or you can say, no, we're going to specifically delegate those 4 duties in the memo that you could delegate. I think you could, I would prefer to have it all under one umbrella of a finance director, so someone's looking and you know who's doing it, and you're not saying, oh, was that one of your 4 duties or one of my 4 duties? From a practical standpoint, in my opinion, it's much easier to have one person and you say anything under the Uniform Fiscal Procedures Act is your duty. You can get help with that duty, but it's your duty. And you're going to be the chief financial officer that's going to sign the documents at the end of the year, attesting to the fact that they're true and correct to the best of your ability.
But we're calling you the management services director as your formal job title.
Right. But to your point, and what I understand is your intent, Bill, I think we already have a level of improvement in the fact that we have an outside agency being those eyes that create the report and have that communication with the in-house finance director / management services director. because then I think that's just, that is
You're
that.
arguing there's more division of responsibility.
That is
already.
that next level of division.
I guess what I'm looking for is a positive statement in here that says, finance director under the management services director.
Right, and that, I mean, that's my intent, is that in our ordinances, I mean, right now, we say we have a finance director, / assistant manager. I think now it's going to be the management services director, and the city hereby delegates all duties of the finance director as part of that job. So you're specifically saying that director is also the finance director.
So you wouldn't change all the ordinances that refer to finance director to say management services director? You would just make that statement in the job description?
Oh,
You can't, can you, by state law, but you have to.
yeah, I'd probably still call him the finance director, and the management services director is performing those duties.
My recollection from Lisa's memo was finance director position is not, is that a state law requirement?
No. It's not a requirement. So you could
just our ordinance states
right
it.
again. So yeah, we have. So if you the clear bright lines are if you create the finance director position and the finance director does all the duties in the law, or you could say no, we want to do away with that position. You certainly can. As a fourth class city, we're not required to have a finance director. But if you don't, then by default, everything goes to the city recorder, which is still an option, but you'd have to hire someone
that would have
or train them.
So
I'd rather just give
in-state,
the title to the management service director and say, it's your
right.
job.
So in state code, it says the city recorder has to do these things, or you have a finance director. So do we have to call it a finance director simply because
right? So
state
if
code
you
says
create
that?
the finance director position, then by statute, it says, if you have created this position, then the finance director shall perform all financial duties under this act.
Okay.
And that's where, that was the first list, so I searched the entire section of the code for city recorder and just gave you that list, because interestingly, I don't think all of them are financial duties. Right. I think some of them are recorder duties, like collecting the records, but it's not clear. So that's where I said, okay, these ones in red I think are financial duties that the finance director, if you create that position, has to perform.
But because of the reference to the term finance director in state code, we have to keep in our ordinance that list of these are the things the finance director will do, and then just
assign
say the management services director will fulfill these duties.
Perform functions as the finance director.
Just like we do, for instance, we say the city manager is the budget officer.
Right.
So we will say the management services director is
the finance
director sure. Pursuant to 10-6-157.
Okay.
Right.
Great. So the action that you need to take tonight, besides giving Steve any more feedback on this, is that we need to pass resolution 2017-13.
Yeah.
And it's up to 2 months, but we're looking forward to a closed meeting at our next meeting.
I hope I'll be ready then. Yep.
And so at that point, we might be able to feel ready to make that ordinance change at the next meeting after.
Right, right.
I think we're moving it along as quickly as we can. And I mean, I agree with the intent that we should keep those separate and have a second set of eyes, but I think we're going that direction as quickly as we can.
And I would like to make sure that, and no disrespect intended to Jake here, but he's taking on a new big nut. And I'd like to make sure that we've got Marcus here for the presentation of the financial statements. Most of the time, and I understand that there could be a time when that may not happen. But I guess I would almost say postpone the presentation of the financial statements to the next meeting.
If he can't be there.
If he can't be there.
Oh, we can do that, yeah, yeah. I think that will be a rarity.
Sure, yeah, but yeah. I see it as that significant.
Okay. Yeah, and just to reiterate something that was said earlier, I think in a way we've got more independence on that issue of the financial statements by having the CPA firm involved.
Yeah, I agree. That's an improvement.
Yeah. And I certainly have a high degree of confidence in the assistance we're getting there and the accounting expertise that we're getting there. So I just feel very good about that. So.
Well, as you well know, being CPAs, they have their certain standards they have to meet.
Have we got any new surprises in the last 2 weeks?
No.
Not in accounting.
Not on the accounting side.
Part of this discussion.
No. All right, so that said, do I have a motion to approve Resolution 2017-13?
I would make a motion that we approve Resolution 2017-13.
Extending the appointment of...
Extending the appointment of the interim finance director for another up to 60 days.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve Resolution 2017-13, extending the appointment of the city manager as the interim finance director, with the understanding that we'll have a closed meeting next time and
right.
Given the
So would you like me to change the language in section 1? These duties shall remain in effect for a period of 60 days rather than September 5th?
Well, why don't you say up to?
That's 62 days.
That's fine. I'm just saying it's a little different than what is in the ordinance.
Leave it as it is.
Whatever you, okay.
Go back to your
September
ordinance as it is.
5th gives us the third
To the
meeting,
meeting,
just in case.
Okay, that's fine. I have no problem with
Thank
that.
you.
I wasn't trying to be difficult.
This time.
This time.
That's usually my job.
All in favor of Resolution 2017-13?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So
Yep.
that's...
For the same reason as last time, it just is a separation, an extra eyes, and I realize that the eyes we have on it now are more than we had before. I would just be more comfortable if there were even more.
Well, let me engage you in a conversation about that, because if you have a finance director, the finance director reports to the city manager by ordinance, just as it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Management services director would report to the city manager and would have the duties of finance director, but in addition would have a CPA firm providing under contract those duties that we've mentioned, including the financial statements. So I think it's, I don't see how having a finance director operating without the assistance of a CPA provides you with greater independence. It doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
I'm just saying that from a principal standpoint, having you be the one that has to do that, even though we have the CPA, I would rather it not. And I know that it's going to go forward, and there are 3 votes in favor of it, and I'm okay with that. I just want to make the statement that it's better in the future when we have the management services director in addition to the CPA then reporting to you, rather than you being the one who has that. And I realize,
so you're just commenting on this
I'm
temporary
commenting on the temporary situation.
Okay.
I'm not commenting on
okay, I got you.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
got you.
It kind of all got lumped together.
Okay.
And we were all in agreement with that intent
Right.
last time.
I just want to make sure that the minutes reflect that we had that discussion and that there was that concern. So, since the votes are already, that it'll be
I
allowed.
misunderstood. I thought you were speaking of the long-term arrangement then.
No, I
Okay.
think that's great. Thank you.
All right, it's 5 after 9. Can we take a very short break? 5 minutes? Be back and finish this up?
I didn't know we were so far from being done that we reviewed it. Okay.
You want to leave the video up or?
We'll just be so fast.